Welcome to the What Good Looks Like podcast, where we shine the spotlight on organizations and leaders who are truly living out what it means to champion the message and the work of purpose in the marketplace today. I'm your host, Davin Salvagno.
I'd say that's the biggest advice I'd give you both individually and organization, is to make sure you understand who you are, what your purpose is, where you're headed, what your picture of the future is, and what are your values, what's going to guide your journey, both personally and organizationally.
It's my absolute honor and privilege to introduce Ken Blanchard.
Good to be with you.
Ken, I'm so excited that you're here with us. I could not think of a better way to wrap up the Purpose Summit than someone who has truly championed what purpose looks like in life, in leadership, in relationships. There's so many things that I could say, but these people have heard enough from me from the last 3 days, so I want them to hear a lot from you. And the title of your talk is one of my favorite quotes, which I'm not going to say. I'm going to have you say it. But it's my favorite quote, probably about love. So if you would, open us up with what it means when you say, love is the answer. What is the question?
Well, I think everything is about love. Everything's about relationships. And so that's what the answer is. Servant leadership is love in action. And because you're reaching out to help and support and encourage other people. And that's what love is all about. You're there for them, not about you.
One of the things that you have done so well, and that I've personally experienced over these last 2 years, is that you are constantly there for others. Always. It doesn't matter who it is, whether it's for your family, for your team. You're always there for others, as you just said. Love in action is being there for others. How have you managed that? You have an incredible organization, all these people, all these books that you've written. How do you manage in our busy, noisy society to constantly focus on being present for the needs of others?
Well, I think that you don't want to get yourself so overscheduled that you don't have time for other people. And so you just need to reach out and be there for them and see what their issue is and see what you can do to help them. And so love is the answer. What's the question?
And you talk about scheduling. I know that you have a regular routine. We've talked about this in some of our live casts. You write about it, you share about it. But how we schedule our lives so that we can be present to serve others, to love others, is so critically important. Can you share with us, whether it's now or maybe earlier in your year, wherever in your journey, what are some of the things that you have done when it comes to not overscheduling, but scheduling your life so that you could be fully present to love and serve others?
Well, I think one of the key things, I've had a lot of fun writing books with wonderful people, and one of the most amazing people was Norman Vincent Peale. He wrote The Power of Positive Thinking. He was 86 years old when I met him, and when we talked together, we decided that we all have two selves. We have an external task-oriented self that used to getting jobs done, and you have a thoughtful, reflective self. And of course, which one wakes up quicker in the morning? Your task-oriented self, because what happens? The alarm goes off. John Ortberg always said that, why don't we call it the possibility clock, or it's going to be a great day clock, no alarm. And you jump into your task-oriented self, and you're eating while you're trying to get dressed, and you jump in your car and you're racing around and you finally get home at night, fall into bed, don't have any energy to say goodnight to somebody who's lying next to you. Next day, boom, you're out there again. Pretty soon you're in a rat race, and I think a lot of people are in a rat race. And I love Lily Talman, the great Hollywood philosopher. She said the problem with a rat race is even if you win it, you're still a rat. And so what I try to do in the morning is enter my day slowly. Think about the day, think what my on my schedule, think about how I want to be today, and just do some preparation, some prayer, some reflection, and just waken my inner self rather than my task-oriented self. And then I can go into the day with a whole different attitude.
So good. You talk about attitude, and one of the things that I've always appreciated about you is, I get accused of being overly positive, if you can imagine that, too optimistic, lots of energy, very loud, seeing, the silver lining and everything, and even in the darkest of times. And you shared something on a live cast with me a couple months ago. And you talked about one of the hardest times that you had to walk through, and even your attitude and how you faced that challenge, which was when you had the fires in your home out there in California. Can you share that story? Because I think it's one of my favorite stories of yours, of how you handled that, why that's important, because I think it ties so critically into the things that truly matter.
Well, our house burned to the ground in 2007. Margie and I were both in Florida, and I got a call from my son, and he said, we've had to evacuate, and I think our house is going to be gone. And I don't know about yours, but it probably is too. And the reality is, he called back and said that, unbelievably, he was standing in their house, and it was saved. They were right down the street from us, but ours is gone, And so when Marge and I flew home and we walked down the driveway, it looked like they had cremated our house, including our cars and all those kind of things. And but Margie was the one. She said, "Well, this is kind of devastating, but nobody got hurt. Somebody went and picked up our dog, and so." But we ended up having a kind of a celebration at our house. We called it a memorial celebration. We had over 100 people come and tell their stories about their times in our house and what had happened positively and all that. So we tried to turn it into a celebration, and to realize that as long as, I said earlier, what's more important than relationships, and the fact that nobody was hurt is the real problem. I think that's one of the sad things about this pandemic, because a lot of people have lost good family members and friends, but we were in that house. We lost a lot of things and all. I was just amazed, though, how people responded to things. Like I had a autographed basketball from John Wooden. He and I did a session together in LA, and his assistant called and said, "Coach heard about your house." He said, "Was his basketball on that burnt house?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, another one's coming down today." And boom, boom, I got another ball from him. And it was just amazing how people responded. I got another football from Y.A. Tittle, who was the great quarterback when I grew up with the New York Giants. So it was just amazing that you lost things, but not people.
I know a good friend of yours, Gary Ridge. You guys wrote a book together, Helping People Win at Work, and you guys sent us a copy. It's actually, we just had a person here in the audience that won a copy of that book, along with many of others of yours, that both you and Gary signed together just last week. And both of you wrote in that book, "It's always about people." It's always about people. Talk to us about how that thought process has shaped your life.
Well, I think it really started with my mom and dad, who were so positive. My mom invented positive thinking before Norman Vincent Peale thought about it, I think. And she was amazing. She always said to me, "Now, don't you act like you're better than anybody else, but don't you let anybody else act like they're better than you. God didn't make any junk. There's a pearl of goodness in everybody. Dig for it, So I became a great digger. And my dad retired as an admiral in the Navy, and I'll never forget, I won the president of the 7th grade in New Rochelle, New York, and I came home, I'm all pumped up, and my dad says, "Well, Ken, your leadership training begins today." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, now that you're president, don't ever use your position, because great leaders are great because people trust them and respect them, not because they have power. And that was the beginning of that. And they just really kind of pushed me about relationships, about people, about being positive and all. And of course, Norman always said, positive thinkers get positive results, and I think that's really, really true. It's a choice in life. You can go around and look for the negative in things and all. It's a positive thinking. We stop watching the news because it's just so negative, and I just wish there was more good news, that's for sure. You just don't ever get anybody report any good news, because I'm sure a lot of good things happened yesterday in different parts of the country, but we never hear about it.
That's obviously a great suggestion to stop watching the news, because it has gotten very negative, and I love that your positive attitude has exuded through every work of yours. I don't think I've ever read a work of yours that's not positively just pouring out with positivity and positively inspired. And, I think it's amazing to me. I know last week you turned 82. We celebrated your birthday with your company on a live cast that was very special. And when I think about 82 years, the legacy of significance that you have lived and led, and some of the really dark times that you've lived through and seen, when we think about history, and we think of what we're in right now. Someone in our audience earlier mentioned that we're just in probably the most, divided time in our lifetimes. There's just been a very challenging year, COVID and social justice, all these different things that are going on. How did you maintain such a consistent attitude of positivity over those years during some of the darkest times of our lifetimes? Because you've seen a lot in 82 years, but you've never wavered in your attitude and your positivity. How have you done that?
Well, I think again, it's modeling and from my mom and dad, and just constantly saying, what good is it going to be for me to get down with everybody else about something? There's got to be some good going on around here, and I want to kind of lift myself and other people up to that, But if we get down in the muck with everybody, it's not a fun place to be. And I'm not a mucker. I just like to see what we can do that's really positive, about things. So I wrote a paper called kind of a leadership vision for America, about, because it's sad, everything in Washington is about win-lose and all. And how do we, rise above that? That's where I think the whole concept of servant leadership is really key. One of the problems in our country is we don't have a vision for our country anymore. And the first part of servant leadership is vision, direction, values, and goals, because leadership's about going somewhere. But we don't even agree on values anymore. I would think freedom of speech would be a value, but if I disagreed with some interest group, they wouldn't say, Ken, we don't agree, let's talk. They would come and surround our business and try to put us out of business. So we just need people who first are, how can we get a vision for our country? Let's look at the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and other things and come up with it and go to the other party and say, here's our best shot at it. What do you think? And because what does it say in the Bible about vision? Without vision, people perish. And I think that's a concern I have. And so I want to kind of constantly push people towards a vision.
So good. We can, I think we could all look at situations that we all could handle differently, and different do-overs in life that we all wish that we could have in the most challenging of times. And you wrote a book called The Mulligan, which if I'm not mistaken, there is a movie coming out about that, and I think I may have potentially have saw someone that looks a lot like you dressed for a part in that movie, and I can't wait to see it. But talk to us. You've written 75 books. There's many of them that I know that had a chance to potentially have a movie made about it. This one, The Mulligan specifically, is in the process of that. Talk to us about that word, mulligan, the book, the work, and why that one? Why is that one specifically stand out?
Well, you never know. It's kind of a God thing because the mulligan's about golf and faith. And I've been playing golf since I was 6 or 7 years old, and to me, God invented golf because it spells game of life first, because sometimes you get good breaks you don't deserve. Sometimes you get good breaks you do deserve. Sometimes you get bad breaks you don't deserve. Sometimes you get bad breaks you do deserve. Sometimes you're playing better than you should. You got to deal with success. Sometimes you're playing worse than you should. You got to deal with it. All in 4.5 hours. But the mulligan, the mulligan's all about a busy businessman who gets to go to a pro-am in South Carolina, and in the book he draws Davis Love as his pro-am partner, and Davis wasn't able to be available for the film. He was doing other stuff, so Tom Lehman is in the film, and so he's all excited because he's a 9 or a 10 handicap, and Davis is going to love to play with him. And the next day he oversleeps and he races to the tee, and he seemingly graciously says to the other three, "Why don't you all hit?" And he's laughing to himself because they're all 20 handicappers. And he gets up to hit, and the caddy starts to tell him what to do, and that annoys him. And Doug hooks it in the rough and chops it out. He's playing absolutely awful. Finally, on the 9th hole, he kills a drive, hits a 4-iron about 4 feet from the cup, and this is the number 2 hole in the course, and if he knocks it in, it's a 2 for his team, which would be amazing. And so in the book, Davis Love is down measuring the putt, and he gets up to putt it, and he leaves it short, and he breaks his putter over his knee. And everybody disappears, and he's kind of walking towards the 10th tee and thinking, I should go to the car. And Davis Love is waiting for him and says, "Paul, we didn't get to talk much during the first round, but to be honest with you, you're not that good to get that mad," which is a wonderful line. You see people throwing clubs and all, they're not that damn good to get that mad. And he said, if my dad was alive, he would be able to straighten out your golf and your life, because we found that they're very much associated. But he said, there's an old pro who sits up on the clubhouse thing, and he's an old buddy of my dad's, and so why don't you go see him? He'll straighten you out. And the old pro is kind of a cross between, the guy, the Clarence that played, in Jimmy Stewart's movie, and just a really interesting character. And in the movie, Pat Boone's playing the old pro, which is really kind of amazing. And so he starts to help this guy look at his life and golf. And one day he comes to see him, and the old pro says, "We're going to play a special game today." He said, "You get a mulligan on any shot you want." He said, "No, I thought it was just the first tee." He said, "Normally, but you can take a putt over, you can take anything over." And so he said, "This ought to be fun." In the beginning, he takes a lot of mulligans, and halfway through the round, he takes no mulligans, hardly at all. And he shoots a 70. He's never even got near breaking 80 in his life. And the old pro is sitting with him at the back of the 18th green. He said, "Paul, why do you think you played so well today?" He said, "Well, I realized if I made a mistake, I would be forgiven. And so I relaxed." And the old pro said, "How would you like to be forgiven every day?" He said, "That would be great. What do I have to do?" He said, "It's not about doing anything. It's what?" He said, "It's believing." He said, "And what?" "In Jesus." He said, "Look, don't get me into faith." He said, "No." He said, "But the Lord sent Jesus down to play the perfect round. Here's his scorecard, 18 birdies. All you got to do is sign the card and attest it, and he'll be waiting on the first tee, to be your caddy." And it's really about life and faith, and that Jesus is the greatest mulligan of all time. He keeps on giving us second chances. And so the fellow who's doing the movie did the Bobby Jones story. He did The Ultimate Gift and a whole bunch. And he just said, wow, what a neat way to share about faith in a non-offensive kind of non-religious way about, that we have a partner that's there for us always. And that's a big relief to me in my life. When I see crazy things, I know I have a partner. So that's, yeah.
So good.
Everybody in the film that worked with Pat Boone said he was a great guy. I didn't get to meet him. I was down there for a few days, but he hadn't gotten there yet. So it's going to be kind of interesting. I got this cameo role at the end of the movie.
So author and movie star, Ken Blanchard. I can't wait. I can't wait to see the movie. On that line, I can't get out of my head. He played so well because he realized that if he made a mistake, he'd be forgiven. And just when you take that in, you think about applying that to relationships, applying it to marriage, applying it to parenting, applying it to leadership, applying it to friendships, applying it to our own personal performance. My gosh, that changes everything. How do you...
I think when you add the concept of grace to that, my wife Margie always says grace to her is that to remember that people are doing the best they can given their level of awareness, and what we need to do is give grace to people as well as ourselves when things go wrong or people say stupid things, and all rather than go in win-lose confrontation kind of thing. And so I think it's a wonderful way to live with that.
So good, so good. We've had hundreds of people here in this 100-year-old theater for the last 3 days, and we're in the closing moments here. And we've had hundreds more viewing live stream even now and throughout the week from across the world. And they've been filled with concepts of what it means to find their individual purpose, their organization's purpose, to live and lead from purpose, to approach relationships from a standpoint of purpose. And we all know that love, grace, positivity, overcoming, all of those things that you shared in this talk are all central to the concept of purpose. If there was one thing that you wanted to leave those listening now with today as it relates to purpose, love, grace, all of those things, what would it be, Ken?
Well, I think you ought to think about what your life is and what is your purpose. My purpose is to be a loving teacher and example of simple truths that helps myself and others to awaken to the presence of God, so we realize we're here to serve, not to be served. And I kind of read that in the morning too, because that's part of who I want to be in that day. And so again, as I said earlier, people without purpose, are kind of out of control and all that kind of thing. So why are you here? What's your purpose? I think everybody ought to just think about that, and make it nice and esoteric, make it whatever, and why are you here? And so I think for me, it's about being a loving teacher and example of simple truths. But if you have a sense of purpose, that helps you rise above the fray in day-to-day actions. And then besides having a purpose, you ought to talk about, what is your picture of the future, So try an interesting exercise, Davin. I don't know if you've ever had, but write your own obituary. What would you like to be remembered for? And in fact, I made a video for my own funeral. And I say, if you're watching this, I'm obviously not here, but let me just say a few things. And I read my mission statement and my obituary, but it's a really interesting thing. What would you like to be said about yourself? And then finally, what are your values? What's going to guide your journey? And my number one value is spiritual peace, and then comes integrity, and then love, and then joy. And then I've operationally defined those things. But when you have that, you have a sense of direction. And organizations that are clear on their purpose and their reason for being in business, they're better than everybody. I mean, the organizations I know are clear on what business they're in and their values and all, are the Starbucks and the WD-40s and the Southwest Airlines and the Disneys and the Wegmans and the grocery business and Synovus and the financial services business, Chick-fil-A and the fast food business, And so I'd say that's the biggest advice I'd give you, both individually and organization, is to make sure you understand who you are, what your purpose is, where you're headed, what your picture of the future is, and what are your values, what's going to guide your journey, both personally and organizationally.
Ken, I can't thank you enough for not just spending time with us here today, but just for constantly always sharing so genuinely, vulnerably, honestly, lovingly, and for pouring so much of yourself into others through your works, through your words, through your leadership, and just by sharing your heart. So grateful for you, for your work, for the legacy that you've lived, the significance you've had on my life, the lives you've touched through your work, and all those who've got to hear your words today. Thank you, Ken.
Well, thank you, Davin. It's certainly been great to be with you. And what a 3 days you put together for these people. And you're quite a guy. In fact, you've given me 10 more books than I've written. I've only written 65, but I'm excited. I'm excited about the next 10, so that I will eventually.
Now, you better get working on those 10 books, because I'm not getting any younger.
Right.
I say that because when I was with Ken at the Ken Blanchard conference before COVID hit, and we sat down for breakfast, and he said, "Are you writing anything on this purpose stuff?" I said, "Actually, I'm finishing a book right now." And that was when he graciously offered to write the foreword to the book. And I'm like, gosh, I got to get this thing done. And after dinner that day, he starts walking out. He turns around and he goes, "Now you get writing, because I'm not getting any younger." So get those 10 books done, Ken.
Okay, I will.
So grateful for you. Thank you so much for everything. Just so appreciative of who you are, what you've done, and how you've impacted our lives. Can we please give Ken one more round of applause?
And I want to do one last thing for you. I want to do one last thing with you all in the audience. Put your right hand on your left shoulder and your left hand on your right shoulder, and give yourself a hug, because you were smart enough to get involved in this Purpose Summit. And that's a special thing. So bless you all.